Hello, hi, how are you? So, I wanted to speak to you a little bit about, you know, this little voice in our mind that can tend to make judgments about so many things. I notice this so much, and I notice it both in myself and in the people around me. And oftentimes, maybe you have also noticed this, it's easier to spot it in other people than in ourselves. But um, I try to spot it in myself as much as I can. Um, Sometimes when I'm around people who have a strong tendency, it's so evident, but sometimes it's more subtle. And I think it's a very powerful practice to keep observing that, and to especially observe the kind of emotional residual it leaves. Um, and the thing is about this, let's call him the judge, the inner judge, um, is usually, and I heard this, I think it was Eckhart Tolle or some very wise man. He said that, what we judge in others, we strengthen in ourselves. So it's kind of a paradox, because while we judge it in a sense that we say this is not good, that this person does this and this, we at the same time somehow we strengthen that same, what we consider to be a fault in ourselves. And that's the weird thing, and I'm trying to get to the root of this. And I can encourage you also to try to observe it, because it's really odd sometimes. So, have you noticed that oftentimes, or sometimes maybe, what we judge in others, there's something of that same trait? Let's say, for example, um, we you know we judge another person because that person is, you know let's say it's a lazy person. We say this is a lazy person, he doesn't make anything like out of his day. So we become very judgmental. And at the same time, that could mean that maybe in ourselves there's like something that we judge as like a lazy thing. Maybe we have learned this in our own upcoming, and so we judge this in ourselves, and because we do that, we then tend to judge it also in others. So what this means for me and my day-to-day practice of being, conscious, is that whenever I see a tendency come up in myself that I'm beginning, or the inner critique is criticizing another person, a behavior of another person, then I, instead of following down that route, of criticizing that person, I try to take this as a notice for myself that, okay, there he is, the inner critique. Now, what's happening here? I'm just about to criticize this and this behavior in that person. And then I ask myself, what about this is within myself? Like, is there something that I'm judging in myself related to that trait? So is there something, that I'm judging myself to be lazy because I'm just criticizing this person? Let's say I'm talking to a friend about a third person. This is often the situation where we tend to, criticize others in sometimes subtle, sometimes less subtle ways. So let's say I'm talking to a friend and talk about a third person, how lazy he would be, and how he wastes his day and his life, maybe even. Then this for me becomes a kind of a starting point to wonder, am I judgmental about myself? Because if that is the case, then it can hold us back in a big way. I noticed this. I can be so judgmental, self-criticizing, um, and I know this just is it's a big obstacle in my life, because if I consider myself, or if I label myself to be lazy, let's say in a certain context, or fearful, scared, afraid, or maybe not disciplined enough, then by judging myself to be that way, I'm strengthening exactly that thing. That's the weird thing, It's not that just because I judge myself, oh, today I was lazy. If I judge myself, if I criticize myself about this, the weird thing is I'm strengthening it. I'm not getting rid of it. Have you ever noticed this, that when we put this sort of negative energy into something, we're strengthening it instead of overcoming it? So if I want to, liberate myself of it, I notice I need to be kind of less hard on myself on it, So if I'm, let's say, I had a lazy day, or I was like, maybe scared in a certain situation, and I see that tendency in myself to that behavior, then what I found to be really powerful, instead of judging myself, is to tell myself, hey, come on, you did your best here. This is maybe an old behavior pattern that was there in that day, but come on, you're working on yourself and you're becoming more aware of it. So just the fact that I became aware of the pattern is such a huge success, So in that way, and I want to hear how this is going for you, but in that way, I'm turning it around into a win, So you spot something in yourself, and then instead of beating yourself up about it, you can say, hey, come on, don't be so harsh on yourself. You noticed it, you're working on yourself, you're growing, and by doing that, it becomes a huge success, And when it becomes a success, what happens is, then we associate more positive emotions about it. We become more joyful about it, because then it's like a success experience, and it encourages us to do more of that good new behavior that we want to learn. So this is a huge learning for me that I've been having over the past month and years, and still having every week and day. And maybe you want to try it out also, if you think that could apply to you. So next time, what you could do is, when you notice the inner critique coming up about certain behavior of another person, or about yourself, either way, try to link it what's going on inside of you. Why are you criticizing that person about this? What of that are you actually criticizing about yourself? And then how can you turn that around into a success, by telling yourself, first of all, don't beat yourself up, and kind of forgive yourself and embrace yourself for your limitation, and above all, the fact that you're trying to work on it, I think that's the most kind of important mindset we can have, that we consider and we try to strive, and we work on ourselves constantly, which means also we fall, we come up again, and by looking at it that way, it becomes more playful, more joyful, and by definition, everything is a success. Every time we fall, we stand up, it becomes a success. So I think that's what I noticed about myself. I became way less criticizing of others, and that for me is like an indication I become also less criticizing about myself, and I think that's a very liberating thing to do. So I would love you, if you send me some feedback, if you try this, when you spot yourself doing some criticizing, how it goes for you. Let me know. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and I hope I see you next week. Wish you a wonderful week. Bye guys.